You all right? Good. 0161 228 2255. If you want to join us, you can. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk if you want to email. And the text number is 07786 206 951. And I don't normally tell you stuff that's none of your damn business. But I'll tell you something that happened in the last 3 days. Happened on Friday. I got a letter on Friday from the VAT people. And it was a threatening letter. Very, very threatening. It said, you owe us this much, and if you don't pay it within the next 7 days, we'll be round your house with a brick hammer. That was what it said. I kid you not. Now, I pay my VAT on time, every time. And so I was a bit put out by this. So I rang them up and said, hey, I paid it. And they said, well, it's not in our account. And I said, well, hang on a minute. Let's have a look. And I'd paid it to the Inland Revenue instead of to the VAT. Now, they're the same people, but obviously you pay it into different accounts. So although I'd paid the government the money I owed the government, I hadn't paid the right bit of the government, and they were going to have me turned upside down and beaten on my feet with sticks by the sound of it. And I don't blame them. And at first I thought, oh, for God's sake. And then I thought, you know, this is a bit harsh. You'd expect, please, Mr. Beswick, would you be kind enough to... No, they start with, we're coming round your house to take your stuff. That's where they begin. And at first I was a bit put out by that, because if a company did that, you'd tell them to go to hell. You'd tell them to go to hell for being so upfront and threatening in their first letter. And then I thought, well, actually, this is quite reassuring. Because we're always saying, and it's in the papers again today, that they prosecute benefit fraudsters, but tax evaders seem to get away with it for donkey's years, and then when they get caught, they give them a tenner out the till. So it was quite interesting to be on the receiving end of the first letter, the first style of letter. And just for the record, what's going to happen now? I checked it out with the revenue. They say, yeah, we've got a cheque off you, or at least we got a deposit from you that we shouldn't have had, but we just kept it. Fair enough. And the revenue are now going to transfer that money to the other account, and it's just a bit of inconvenience for everybody all round because of incompetent Beswick. So that's fine. But it was quite, as I say, it was quite comforting to hear that they start heavy with people who they think, quite reasonably think, are not paying their bills. So well done the VAT, and well done the revenue. And I'm going to be off for a fortnight after tomorrow, but it's not because I'm in jail. although it was a close-run thing, apparently. It's because I'll be on holiday. And if they come to our house to restrain the goods, well, I'm afraid the house sitter will have to deal with it. 0161 228 2255. We're going to talk to Sydney in a moment.
To show at the Hampton Court Palace Flower Show, you need to know how to protect endangered plants to preserve the past, the very latest grow your own gourmet secrets, and how we'll be gardening 50 years in the future. Only the greenest fingers can take centre stage. It's showtime. The Hampton Court Palace Flower Show starts tonight at 7 on BBC Two.
More Floribunda. Sydney in Earlham at Thaites. Hiya, Sydney.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Good afternoon.
Beswick.
What can we do for you?
Well, I would like your opinion about the National Health Service. We've heard and read a lot about it being a free service. Now, in my opinion, and I don't know whether you'll agree with me, is the fact that as we are paying national insurance, etc., and I'm old enough to have engaged in it at its commencement, I understand that it was a contract between the person and the government, that they would provide the facilities, and in return we would get the health that we needed. I'd like your opinion on that.
Well, first to say that you are, of course, unequivocally, absolutely right. But, I mean, I know some reporters say the free National Health Service is a kind of shorthand, but it's wrong, as you point out. And what Nye Bevins said, and what ministers say when they're talking about it, is free at the point of use. So you don't pay at the point of use, you pay collectively.
I do understand that.
Well, that's it. I mean, there's no escaping. You are correct, Sidney.
I am correct, but at the same time, I wonder why the emphasis has been placed upon the fact that it is, as I've had visitors from abroad commending the fact that it's a free service. It is not a free service, and they should not describe it.
Well, Sidney, yes,
even though it's a shorthand.
But Sidney, that would apply to everything. The army isn't free. When you get on your bicycle or your feet and you walk along the footpath isn't free. But we don't describe it as a paid-for footpath, do we? We say that, well, the roads come free. Nothing is free. We pay, you and me, taxpayers, pay for everything.
I do agree with you, but not in the same manner as it's been described persistently as the National Health Service is I agree with you about the shorthand, but it is... They do keep describing it as a free service.
But Sidney...
I understand what you're saying about the fact that we walk on pavements and we use the facilities, but it is not as persistently placed in the media as a free service. And yet, in this instance, I know it's the anniversary, the 60th anniversary. As I said, I'm old enough to have engaged in it, and its inception. But I do think that this describing it as a free service gives a wrong impression.
You're quite possibly...
the same way as having to pay insurance for your house and your contents, etc.
Well, you're absolutely correct. I have nothing to offer by way of challenge other than to say that I think when people use the term free, they're attempting to distinguish it from the kind of service they have in most of the United States and indeed most other countries, where there was a story told on Friday when we were doing a lot of national health stories, obviously. There was a thing on Friday where a lady from the United Kingdom was involved in a road traffic accident, and she was surprised. This was an American lady. She was surprised because the health authority didn't go through her bag looking for her credit card to see that she could pay, because she said that's what happens to her in the United States. You have to prove you can pay before they'll treat you. So I think they're using the term, and yes, Sidney, it is wrong because it is shorthand, but they're using the term to distinguish from a system where you pay up front for the element of the service you're going to use. But it isn't free. You're absolutely right.
Well, obviously, I'm very pleased to hear your response, Alan, but I have my view, and I do think that it shouldn't be broadly described as a free service. However, may I raise something else?
You may indeed.
Well, during my war service, I was in the same mob that you were in, and the smoking situation that we've got now. When I went abroad, we were issued, would you believe, 50 cigarettes a week, free issue.
You were, yes. Well, first of all, Sidney, they weren't free. The taxpayer paid for them, but do go on.
But at the same time, I didn't smoke at the time until I went into the army, and I was given these free cigarettes. And, of course, I fell at the first hurdle, and I now suggest that I should be in a position to be able to sue the government because they introduced me into smoking.
I should give it a try if I were you. You give it. I shouldn't put too much money on it, no, Sidney, but give it a run, mate.
Of course, you cannot. The fact is, you cannot sue the Crown, can you?
You can't sue the Crown, but you can sue officers of the Crown. So you can't sue Her Majesty, but you can sue the Defence Secretary.
And if I had the same money as Her Majesty's got, I would possibly stand a chance of winning my case.
I'm not sure that you would, to be honest, but I'd love to be there while they're discussing it. Good on you.
Thank you very much for listening to me.
My pleasure, Sidney. Good on you, mate.
God bless you.
I like the sound of that. Sue the government. They taught me how to smoke. Mind you, we got Mars bars or Cadbury's Dairy Milk. If we went on exercise, they gave us a Mars bar or a block of Cadbury's Dairy Milk to sustain us. Fantastic. So I can now sue the government on Sydney's logic. I can now sue the government because I'm a fat pig. Because my mum and dad couldn't afford to give me chocolate. I never really got chocolate proper like that at the drop of a hat until I joined the army. I don't know who I blame for ice cream. Actually, I think I probably blame my dad because he likes it as much as I do. So I think I might have to sue my dad for getting me hooked on ice cream. I've never got off that one. It would be good, wouldn't it, if you could sue the government? I like that. 0161 228 2255. Story on the front page of The Sun today, but it's in other newspapers as well. David Cameron, jail if you carry a knife. That's it. Jail if you carry a knife. David Cameron will fight Britain's knife crime epidemic even, by automatically jailing anybody caught carrying a knife. I know the chefs and the butchers are going to have a rough time, but there you are. In an exclusive interview with The Sun, the Tory leader tells of his plans to beef up current laws after 18 youngsters died violently in London this year. And Jack Straw knows a bandwagon when he sees it. The Justice Secretary, Jack Straw, has indicated that ministers will review new sentencing guidelines on knife crime, which are due to take effect next month. Now, just listen to this. These guidelines are already set. This isn't something that they're thinking of doing. This has already been discussed. It's already gone through the Home Office and everything, and it's about to come in next month. And these were the guidelines that were about to be given to magistrates in England and Wales. And the guidelines say this: people caught in possession of a bladed article or offensive weapon may be given a fine or community order if the weapon isn't used to threaten or cause fear. Now, Mr Straw said he was talking to other ministers and awaiting representations from them after reviewing the guidance, which comes in force on August the 4th. At a briefing about drugs in prison, the Justice Secretary said details about the knife crime sentencing review would be given later because he wasn't fully cited on the issue. Now, far be it for me to attack Jack Straw, but the guidelines are already written. They've already had the discussions. It is clearly, until Cameron said that they're going to be stricter with people caught in possession of knives, until then, Jack Straw was perfectly happy for the guidelines to say people caught in possession of a bladed article or offensive weapon may be given a fine or community order if the weapon isn't used to threaten or cause fear. So, in other words, David Cameron saying that when they get in, if they get in, when they get in, they will be stricter with people who are found in possession of knives, and indeed will have a custodial sentence as almost automatic, if not automatic, has caused Straw to think again. We now have government by statement. We do, don't we? The government says this is what we're going to do. This is it. We've thought this through. We've had all the research. We've seen all the figures. We've done everything. We've thought it through. We're now going to do this. And they set it in motion because that is their job. The government's job at the end of the day is to govern. So they set in motion the process that they think is the best way forward. And then somebody else says, actually, if we were doing it, we'd do it differently. And that causes the government to panic. The Labour government, I say Labour, the current government, New Labour, the Labour government is scared. It's a sissy. It is scared. It will do whatever anyone tells it to do. What is wrong with Jack Straw saying, this is the policy, we've done the research leads us to believe this, we've thought about the political implications of it, and we are now going to implement it. You know, this piece of rule, if you like, was going to come in on August the 4th. They didn't think of it on August the 3rd. They think of it months and months and months in advance. They pay civil servants a tidy sum to prepare the documentation. The civil servants provide a range of options to the government, And they say, the research says you could do this, you may want to do this, you may want to do this. Their political advisors say the benefit and consequences of doing this are thus. So make a decision. And they make a decision, and then they start printing the paperwork and all the rest of it. And then one person says, actually, we'd do it differently. So what does the government do? It hides under the stairs. It runs scared. The current Labour government is yellow. 12:20, BBC Radio Manchester News headlines with Michelle Adamson.
Ronald Castry, the man serving life for sexually assaulting and murdering Rochdale schoolgirl Leslie Mulseed, has been given permission to mount an appeal against his conviction. Leicestershire Police have agreed to release 81 pieces of information about their investigation into Madeleine McCann's disappearance in Portugal a year ago. 200 cleaners at Manchester Airport will go on strike for 3 days next week in a row over pay. Manchester's weather, heavy showers, but also 1 or 2 bright spells today, highs of 16 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Please take care if you're travelling along the M60 at the moment. There's an awful lot of surface spray affecting the whole of the M60 in either direction. Of course, there's been a lot of heavy rainfall over the past couple of hours or so. That's also affecting traffic on the M61, the M62 from Cheshire to Manchester, and the M62 across the Pennines. So again, do take it carefully. And if you're travelling through Salford on Langworthy Road, that stretch between Bolton Road and Castleways is still closed off for work on the mini roundabout. Bolton Road's also closed at the junction with Langworthy Road. And don't forget, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
You're never more than 20 minutes away from the latest traffic through the day.
Kevin says, I'd like to see you get your money back from the Inland Revenue. No, I'm not getting it back, Kevin. It's not coming back to me. They're giving it to another department. It's not quite the same as giving it you back, but it felt good at the time. Charlie in Failsworth. Hiya, Charlie.
Morning, Alan.
What have you got?
Just listening to this chap about talking about people getting, the health service free.
Yeah.
Well, how about these people, these children, well, not children, teenagers that leave school and go straight to college and to university? They're not paying any tax. They're not paying any national insurance. They get national health service treatment, so surely they're getting it free.
Well, they are, but they're getting it on the basis that they're still a member of a family, and the family have put the money up first, I suppose. But, yeah, it's a nice point.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like individually they're getting it free. The parents obviously paid it, but the actual children, well, teenagers are getting it free because they've not paid a thing.
They've not paid a bean, no. You're absolutely right, yeah. So it is free for some.
Free for some, yeah.
It's very hard to work out. I don't think anybody in the end gets it for absolute free, but I suppose a child that is born and then dies before they start paying tax, whether they die at 56 and they've never paid tax, or whether they die at 6 and they've never paid tax, they got it free.
Yeah.
But their parents did have to pay.
Yeah.
But it's odd, isn't it? I mean, I do like words. I do like conversations about words. But it would be cumbersome if every time we had to refer to something that is provided at the aegis of government, but obviously as a result of our tax, we had to say free at the point of use.
Yeah.
The soldiers work for us because... and don't cost us a penny. We don't have a whip round every time we've got to pay a soldier. The whip round is the collective one. So, yeah, I think free at the point of use would get somewhat cumbersome.
Yeah. And this other chap, he talks about suing the government for... because he smokes now and he didn't fully join it.
Yeah.
Well, I was in the Fleet Air Arm for 4 years.
Yeah.
I was teetotal when I went in, but I wasn't when I came out.
I should start the action immediately.
Yeah, because I found out that if you didn't take your tot of rum, you got threepence a day.
Right.
So rather than the threepence, which wasn't worth a lot, even in the 50s.
Yeah.
I thought, well, I'll try the tot, and I enjoyed it.
Did you? It's supposed to be horrible, isn't it? I've never tasted it.
No, it's the petty officers one was a little bit too strong for me. Well, I wasn't a petty officer. They got it 1-1. Ours was 2-1.
Oh right, so that's all. Oh, that is scandalous. That I'd have started a riot. Dear me, that's not acceptable.
And the other one with the cigarettes.
Yes.
If you're on board ship on a carrier, you got 600 fags a month duty, free.
Yeah.
And they were all the branded cigarettes. Any cigarette that was on the market was on the ship. But if you're on an air station, you got 400 a month, and they were what they call blue liners. They had just a plain cigarette with a blue line down with RN on.
Navy cigarettes.
Yeah. Of course, the Customs and Excise, that's what they tried for years. They eventually succeeded in stopping it all.
Well, the free rum was stopped, I remember that. Yeah, and discounts for squaddies and all the rest of it was stopped. But they changed the whole way that military personnel were paid. I mean, even as recently as when I was in, you got your food and your kit and everything, your accommodation for free. If you lived in quarters, they were provided. By that I mean family quarters. They were provided free and the like. But now everybody has to pay for everything.
Yeah, so I wouldn't fancy being in the forces now. Like I said, I was in the middle 50s, so it was easy. You just had to draw your pay, and everything else was found for you.
Yeah, exactly. It strikes me as being the sensible way, but there you are. What do we know? Good on you, Charlie.
All right, okay.
Have a good day, mate. 0161228 2255. Reg, Jim Berry. Hiya, Reg.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Did I hear right today that our ex-chancellor said that if we all buy less food, i.e. not throw some away, the price of food in the shops will come down?
I don't think he said the price would come down.
I got the impression that that's what he implied, that because of the world prices of food and fuel and everything else are going up, then if we don't throw as much away, in other words, we don't buy as much, the price will come down. But my logic is that, no, that wouldn't happen, because if you buy less from a supermarket or a shop, they can't buy so much bulk, therefore they have to pay a higher price. So the prices probably will go up.
Well, no, what he actually said was that we waste, I've got one newspaper in front of me with
480 odd quid a year.
Yeah, £8 a week by making our shopping go further is what he's saying.
Yeah,
so
I agreed it would benefit us, but if you go and buy less goods from any company, then they will buy less goods, and they can't get such a good price, can they?
That's in the worlds of supply and demand. That is probably true.
Yeah. So therefore, to make a similar profit to what they used to do, they'd have to put their prices up.
Well, no, they wouldn't. You see, because the supply chain for food is now so structured that supermarkets actually tell the supplier what they're going to pay for it.
Exactly, yes.
And they'll still be able to do that, because although they'll be buying less from the supplier if Gordon Brown got his way, they'll be buying less. They will still be the biggest fish in the sea.
Yeah.
They will still be the people who say, you know, the supermarkets...
I thought I'd discovered a flaw in our ex-chancellor's logic.
Well, yeah, they're fairly easy to find generally, but I think he's right on this occasion in that he appears to have said, if you don't waste so much, you will use more as a bigger proportion of what you've got, and if you only buy what you're going to consume, you'll save £8 a week.
Yeah, I think if we're all honest, Alan, we all do that, don't we?
Oh God, yes, we do. We all waste. We have become a profligate society.
And it's this business of no, I would agree with him if they could get the supermarkets to stop these silly 3 for the price of 2 things. I mean, I was in our local big one last week, and I wanted a couple of one item. And when I got to the checkout, she said, "Oh, you could have got 3 for £2, as opposed to paying like £1.50 for one." You know.
I've even had at the supermarket checkout them say that's a buy one get one free, and I say, well, I only want one. Yeah, and they say, oh, I'll get someone to go and get you another, and they get a member of staff. And I said, no, don't do that. No. And she said, well, you're entitled to it. And I said, yeah, but I'm going to walk out the store and put it in a bin.
Exactly.
Because I don't want it by the time I get around to using that. And that's, we have got our society to the stage now where that's what they do, that we waste. Because if we didn't waste, and this is the thing, I think between us we may have found the flaw in his argument, and the flaw is this: if we buy less, okay, the supermarket will still make the same profit. They will still have price control because they're, as I say, the biggest fish in the sea. But if we buy less, then fewer people will be needed to sell it to us.
Yes.
And what will happen is they'll get the sack. So the consequence of the Prime Minister's save yourself £8 a week, if every one of us saves £8 a week, that's probably a job for every 50 or 60 people.
Yeah. Anyway,
So-
I thought I'd just come on another word.
Good on you. Well done.
Anyway,
we found it between us in the end.
Listen, enjoy your holiday.
I'll do my
Are you
best.
going back to Italy again?
No, not France this year.
Oh, France, right. Enjoy yourself.
We like to spread our glories around.
Well, it's nice and sunny. We've just come back from Spain last week on our fortnight's holiday, and the temperature over in Spain was in excess of 30 degrees, even at 12 o'clock at night. And I think France is about the same if it's southern France.
Right, well, I'll not be going then. Have a good and Reg, cheers.
Watch the little red head.
I never bother with all that. I never bother with all that rubbing oil on and wearing hats and all that gubbins. We're supposed to be outside. That's what we were designed for.
Okay,
Good on you,
anyway,
cheers.
take care.
Simon in Warrington, I don't know what your opinion on the effective of public campaigns costing millions of pounds to the taxpayer. The latest one being, lay down your knives. My view is that the only people who take any notice of a knife is some of the young kids who may be carrying or considering carrying one for their own protection. Why? Because they don't want to go to prison for carrying protection. The people who traditionally carry knives, the sociopathic criminals, will continue to carry them. Well, Simon, I think there's an awful lot of truth in what you say, but the problem seems to be now, and I've no evidence to support this other than what I read in the newspapers and the rest of it, but the problem seems to be that more and more youngsters are carrying knives, they say, for their own protection. I think it's less prosaic than that. I think what they're saying is we're carrying a knife because that is what you do now. It's almost a fashion item. If you've not got a knife, you're a sissy. There's possibly an element of that. And what the campaign is attempting to do is to say the more people who carry knives, it's an oxymoron really, isn't it? The more people who carry knives, the more people will get stabbed. That's it. The more people carry knives, the greater the number of people that will get stabs. It's almost proportionately provable. If 10% more people carry knives, then 10% more people will be stabbed. Almost. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the number of knives being carried to be fewer, and therefore the incidents where they are used fewer. You stop a kid in the street, if you're a kid, and we all know that most violence, you hear of older people and middle-aged people being frightened to go out at night because they might get hurt and all the rest of it. And I understand those fears. I don't have them myself, but I understand them. But you're more likely to be assaulted, you're more likely to be stabbed if you're below the age of 25. Now, you imagine you're below the age of 25, you're wandering about the streets, and somebody stops and starts pushing you around, looking for a fight, and you're carrying a knife for your defence. What are you going to do? You're going to pull the knife out. Now, when you pull the knife out, he might have one as well. So he pulls his out and stabs you. Or, in order to defend yourself, you pull a knife out and stab him. If neither of them had knives, then it wouldn't happen. They'd still get laid on, as they say, but there wouldn't be a stabbing. And that's what the government's trying to do. It's trying to reduce the number of knives being carried and therefore reduce the opportunities for stabbing, as it will. Whether it'll work, well, that's another story. I'm not aware that many public campaigns that aren't followed up by some kind of firm action succeed in their endeavour. I can't think of any. They kept telling us, didn't they, to use less fuel, take shorter journeys, don't use your car on shorter journeys, walk. It's good for your health, it's good for the environment. No one took a blind bit of notice. There was the odd EBG bit, the odd sandling wearing hippie, but they felt that anyway. So it changed the mind of nobody. Price of petrol went up, price of diesel went up, consumption went down. Exactly. Tobacco? Nobody started taking that much notice of giving up cigarettes. They were affected by price when cigarettes went up beyond the limit. Eventually they said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing it. I'm going to stop. And that's what happened, and that's probably what always happens. John in Timperley. Hi, John.
Yes, good morning, Alan.
Good morning.
It was with regard to the Wimbledon Tennis Championship.
Ah, yes.
I don't want to appear a bit of an anorak, so bear with me, but I noticed in the paper yesterday when I was looking at the photographs, and then I thought about one thing, and then I thought I'd look back at the other photographs through the week. And what it comes to is quite an interesting thing, really. 8 out of 10 people on the photographs were women. And I was wondering if it's a sort of unhealthy sort of attitude to a sport that so many, and I might tell you, women over 40 seem to be providing the majority of the spectators at the championships. And they didn't look the sort that would queue up for tickets overnight, because they're all over 40 or 50. I mean, not that soul, but not the sort that stay out all night under canvas queuing up, is it? And it just seemed a strange thing that even for the men's championships and the women's championships, the majority of the spectators are women.
Well, isn't it because, frankly, spectator-wise, it's a female sport? It just is. It always has been, hasn't it?
Why?
I've no idea. I have absolutely no idea.
Do you mean it's a female sport as far as spectators are concerned, you mean?
Yeah.
As distinct from football?
Mm.
Well, I certainly think it equates with equestrian events where 90% of the spectators seem to be women, don't they?
Again, but hasn't that traditionally been the case? I don't think you're telling us anything we didn't know ourselves, that it's generally females that like tennis.
Well, why is that?
I've no idea.
How do they get the tickets? Have you ever tried getting tickets?
Well, it might be the blokes that get the tickets for them. I've no idea. But that would be sexist and patronising.
I wanted you to say that. I wanted you to say that.
But it might even be. It might, because I don't even know how you get tickets for Wimbledon. I don't know. I do know that an awful lot of tennis clubs, if they are members of the Lawn Tennis Association, are given an allocation of tickets, and it may well be that the overwhelming majority of membership of Lawn Tennis Association membership clubs are female. I don't know.
Maybe it's that they have the time to be able to go.
Well, that's possible as well, but I promise you, if you go to the Take That concert, you'll stand out a bit, because it'll be nearly all female.
You're correct there as well, yes, you are.
Now, I went to the Leonard Cohen concert, and it was 50-50.
Mm.
And I'm sure, I can't think of one at the moment, I'm sure there are performers that if you turn out, it'll be predominantly a male audience. Probably the Grateful Dead or something, I've no idea. A Grateful Dead fan, I'm sure there must be one, will now come on and explain how wrong I am. But that's just the nature, isn't it?
Well, you don't think the women are lusting over the legs of the men or anything?
I wouldn't want to be a party to such a thought, but I wouldn't want to offer much argument to you either.
Anyway,
And what's wrong with that, say I?
What, lusting?
Well, lusting. There's nothing wrong with a bit of lust.
Well, I'm ashamed to say I only watch the women's matches, so...
Do you? Is it the knickers that get you going?
I kid myself, it's the quality of the play is much more exciting, but I'm not sure that's true.
You see, I watched that young lass, that 14, is she?
Yes,
14, you know? Didn't she do well and all of that? And what a charming young lady she is now. Just give her a year in the eyes of the media and we'll turn her into a witch, but there you are. But I couldn't help thinking, there was a mum watching her, and I couldn't think of many other circumstances where a mother would be so overjoyed that 12 million people were looking at her daughter's knickers. It's just me, I know, but I couldn't get that thought out my head.
I wasn't looking at her daughter's knickers, I must tell you. I was just enthralled at the fact that she was so good at the age of 14. Admittedly, the other girl was about the same age, but the standard of play was pretty high, wasn't it?
I've nothing to judge it by, but all the commentary I heard was it was pretty high. The young lass that won, I've even forgotten her name already, I'm sorry for her, but the young lass that won, she fell apart, didn't she, for a while, and then shouted at herself.
And corrected herself, yes, she did indeed. But anyway, there you go. I think I was hoping that you would say, well, it's the men that buy the tickets and the women that go because they're not working. But I think we get a big response from your listeners if we suggested that, wouldn't we?
You can never hide the facts, John. I always go on the facts. Good to talk to you, mate.
Thank you.
I know. 0161 228 2255. Is it the case? Loads of people are members of tennis clubs. Is it the case that tennis is, in effect, from a spectator point of view, a woman's game? A game for the ladies, as they say. I have no idea. But he is correct in that when you hear people talking about Wimbledon, they often turn out to be the female of the species. Despite the fact that it is a very, very physically challenging game. I was only thinking, I watched a little bit, I didn't see the end of it. Who won, by the way? Who won, Nadal or that other one? Who won? I can't remember. All right, Nadal won, right. Well done him. Yeah, right. What was the other one called? Yeah, you're not helping. I've forgotten the name of it. Was it Sampras, or is he dead? I can never remember. Federer, Bjorn Borg, yeah. Even I know it wasn't him. Definitely was. Right, Sampras and I've forgotten the other fella's name already. Never mind. Right, Federer and Nadal. And I watched a little bit of it, and I thought, by heck, it goes on for a while, doesn't it? It was about 3 hours, wasn't it? And they run a long, long way. And I watched, a while back now, fortnight ago, I watched a football match. No, I tell a lie. I watched about 10 minutes at the end of a football match. And it was at that time when they send some of the players home and they let some others who've done now all day have a go. You know, last 10 minutes, go on, you have a go. And when the bloke was coming off, when he was being substituted, that's changed since the Who had it. Anyway, when he was being substituted, they had a note and it said, so many yards. And this bloke had run about 10 miles during the game. 10 miles. No wonder they're knackered at the end. But a tennis player must run a lot further. Only in nickel bits, because it's not wide, is it? You know, 10 yards here, 10 yards there. But he does it for 5 hours. Dear God. Anyway, I'm going on and on and on. How unusual. Just gone 20 to 1. Michelle Adamson's got the news.
The man jailed for murdering the Rochdale schoolgirl Leslie Mulseed has been given permission to appeal against his conviction. At least 40 people have been killed in a suicide car bombing in the Afghan capital, Kabul. Gordon Brown says if we want our household bills to start going down, we've got to stop wasting food. Manchester's weather, heavy showers, but also some bright spells today, highs of 16 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, the wet weather's certainly causing disruption on the motorways. The M60, there's an awful lot of surface spray affecting the whole of the M60 either side of the carriageway, of course, and the M61 also affected by bad weather between 4 Farnworth and 1 the Twinton interchange. Don't forget, of course, visibility is very poor indeed on some of these routes, so do take care. Now, if you're using the M62 heading into Manchester between Junction 9, Winnick through 12, the Eccles interchange, not much going on really, all seems fairly quiet again, just bad weather to contend with really. And don't forget, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Steve Wilde.
Hello, good afternoon to you. Cristiano Ronaldo is having surgery on an ankle injury in Amsterdam today. The operation on his right ankle will keep Ronaldo sidelined for around 6 weeks. More from Juliette Ferrington.
The 23-year-old player of the year is having an operation on his right ankle and could be out for up to 6 weeks. This could have a major impact over his fitness for the start of the season. Ronaldo is yet to return to Carrington and isn't due back in England until next week at the earliest. But surgery was arranged after the player met with medical staff from both United and the Portuguese FA last week in Lisbon to assess the extent of his injury.
Carlos Queiroz has given the strongest indication yet that he could leave United and take charge of Portugal. The Reds' assistant boss has been in Lisbon to discuss the job and says the matter needs to be resolved by the Federation and United. The Bury defender Efe Soji believes the playoffs are a realistic target for them this season. The Shakers finished 13th in League Two last season.
We can't say we're going to go for promotion because they have to put money into the club, and we don't really have that at the moment. But to play and go for the playoffs, I think we've got enough quality of the players in the changing room now to take us there.
Wigan have offered professional contracts to 7 youth team players for next season. John Routledge, who was Youth Team Player of the Year, is amongst them. Lou Vincent is to replace Brad Hodge as Lancashire's overseas player on a permanent basis. The Kiwi had been covering for Hodge whilst he was on duty with Australia in the Caribbean. However, Hodge has now decided to return home to be with his wife, who's recovering from illness, and Vincent will remain at Old Trafford for the rest of the season. The Salford coach, Sean McRae, has told BBC Radio Manchester that being granted a Super League franchise would surpass anything the club wins this year. The City Reds beat Doncaster yesterday to lift the Northern Rail Cup. They're currently top of National League One.
What we said at the start of the year was we wanted to win the Northern Rail Cup and we'd love to win the grand final. We've done one of those. We're sitting on top of the table. We've got a tough run in. In between time, of course, we have a licence announcement coming up 2 weeks on Tuesday. Now, for me, that'll be the ultimate. You know, that'll be the biggest victory for this club this year if we are granted a licence for the next 3 years.
If you found yourself glued to that epic men's single final at Wimbledon last night, you were in good company. 12.7 million people watched Rafael Nadal beat Roger Federer in 5 sets. And in Speedway's Elite League tonight, Bellevue entertained Coventry. Stockport-based rider James Wright will wear the Aces colours as a guest rider, whilst new Danish signing Patrick Hugard makes his home debut.
With Becky Want, it's Friday afternoon, every afternoon.
I've spent every single night for the last, as long as the sun's been shining, in the beer garden of the local pub. And I never go to the pub. I go to the pub twice a year, but, I can't stay away. Obviously, I'm on the lemonade every evening. You understand that, don't you?
More Manchester, more Becky.
It's sexy, isn't it, belly dancing? It came across as something very sexy to Simon Cowell.
He had a very funny reaction.
Do you like him?
He's definitely got something about him.
Oh, he has. He's got more than a little something about him.
Becky Want.
Very much looking forward to it, I have to say.
This afternoon from 2
at BBC Radio Manchester.
Right, I'm in the doghouse. Jackie in Cork says, I hope you're travelling to France with National Express coaches. They've got a trolley service for long distance now. Or maybe you're catching the Euro train. Or, and this would be admirable, as a keen and regular swimmer, you're swimming the channel with your wife shouting through a megaphone from a small boat. My wife doesn't need a megaphone, let me tell you. Any of these, I may suffer for that, any of these would be a reduced carbon footprint journey. No, they wouldn't. None of them would. None of them. They would all be an increase in carbon usage. The only way I could maintain my carbon usage level would be by staying at home. And I'm not doing that. By plane, she says. Disgraceful. Yes, I am going by plane. And I'm hoping it goes very, very fast and uses more fuel. Because, frankly, I don't care about the environment. I don't give a stuff. Because if, and I say this 1,000 times a year, or thereabouts, if, in 100 years' time, the people who are alive on the planet then haven't sorted out the science of it, then they have only themselves to blame. Steve in Royton. Hiya, Stephen.
Hello, Alan.
What have you got?
I was just listening to what you said about the government and them being yellow.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think they're actually governing by not consensus, but because of fear. One of the things that really worries me, you do have people going around with knives and people getting killed tragically, and all them things are really tragic to the people involved. The government's got to do something to stop people carrying knives. But to come out with a statement saying that everybody caught carrying a knife will end up in prison is ridiculous. And the reason I think it's ridiculous, we're not going to have prison cells. We're not going to have enough cells to actually hold people in. And prisons should be partly punishment, partly rehabilitation. And unfortunately, they're saying that everybody's carrying a knife is going to intend to use it. And there's all different shades of grey, and that's for the courts to decide. But to say that people are going to go to prison just because they carry a knife, where's the justice?
Well, OK, let's knock a couple of things on the head straight away. Justice, I'll tell you where justice is. Nowhere. Doesn't exist, never has, never will. You don't get justice. There's no such thing. It cannot exist. It's perfection, and we can't have that. So that's that one out of the way. I didn't say if everyone carried it, or more people carry knives.
No, you didn't. No.
No. But even those who say everyone who carries a knife, I'm not sure there are many who say everyone who carries a knife actually intends to use it. The people, like the senior politicians, say there are young people now carrying knives because they think it will improve their chances of survival in a fight. In other words, for self-defence.
Yeah.
OK. Well, that's not a new argument. That's been around a long time. But the thing you say about prison is perfectly valid, of course, and that is, yes, it is the job of prison to punish. It is the job of prison to hopefully rehabilitate. It's his job to rehabilitate. Hopefully it can achieve it. But it has another function too, which you didn't dwell on, and that was the job of prison is to deter people from a course of action that society doesn't want them to take. So it also has a deterrent. Now, the punishment element of it is, if you like, the deterrent, but the purpose of the judicial system is to deter people from a course we, society, don't want them to take. And what I think is being said by the commentators at the moment is that there is sufficient deterrent, or sufficient pain, if you like, of those who are caught to deter the others from carrying a knife.
Yeah, I agree with you as well.
Well, it's not me. I'm just giving you the.
I agree with the. I agree with the sentiment. It should be a deterrent factor in all imprisonment. Yeah. I agree with the deterrent.
But the government's position presently, which is why I ended up saying they were scared and yeller. I prefer yeller to yellow on this occasion. Yeller seems to cover it. Yellow seems to be a colour. But, you know, we both know what we mean. But the reason I commented was because the government, with all its institutions and all its individuals and everyone it could possibly need, looking at the subject, decided that when the new Magistrates' Guide come in on August the 4th, it will say that a person caught carrying a bladed article or offensive weapon, knife to you and me, may be given a fine or community order if the weapon isn't used to threaten or cause fear. Now, that's what was coming in. That's what the government had decided was the right course.
And there's the deterrent there as well.
Well, if they change that position, the deterrent may well be more forceful. But the idea that you'll get fined or a community order doesn't scare people. And so what Cameron has said, what the leader of the opposition has said, is if they get elected, they will immediately pass legislation that says if you're caught carrying a knife, a prison sentence is the norm. Now, many people will say, I'm quite prepared to risk a fine, I'm quite prepared to risk a community order, but I'm not going to jail. I'm not carrying a knife if it means going to jail. It's a bit like speeding. But people speed because they think, well, I get caught, all right, I've got a clean licence, I'm only going to get 3 points or whatever it is, I'll get a fine, I'll live with that. And so they speed. I'm not advocating this, but if you're caught speeding, you'll go to jail for 9 years, I promise you we'd be driving a lot slower. Because the deterrent would work.
Yeah.
It would work.
Yeah, but again, one of the problems we have in this country is if you're going to have more people going to prison, then you're going to need more prisons to actually to house them. And it's already been said that there's not enough prison cells to hold people. So where's the deterrent when the magistrates and the judges can't pass sentence?
Well, that's not the job of the magistrate. The magistrate will implement the sentence that the sentencing guidelines lay down, and if that means a custodial sentence, that is what they will get, and it's then for the prison service to sort itself out in that way. Now, frankly, what many people who ring me say is, OK, there aren't enough prisons, we can't build more prisons in time, so why the hell are we worrying about the fact that they're sleeping 3 in a bed? Get them 5 in a bed, who cares? That's what the public say. Not a majority, I hope, but that's what they say.
Well, some people will say that.
Well, they will, and it's hard. It's very easy to be a socialist in, you know, and a caring, loving individual in a world that is full of everything. It's got enough of everything and everybody's behaving. But once people start misbehaving, it has got to be stopped. Because socialism won't work, and all that caring attitude won't work if the nasties get control.
No, the nasties, you've got to make sure the nasties don't take control. And if need be, then you've got to bring in punitive measures, yes. But unfortunately, I don't think, and it's a difficult one, but I'm not paid as a politician to actually resolve this. But we do have politicians in Parliament who are supposed to be governing. And like you said earlier on, they're not governing as such. One time, you used to be able to go and vote, and you'd be voting for something. Nowadays, people are lost on what way to vote, because politicians are not thinking in the nitty-gritty of what these policies imply.
Well, it's not just they're not thinking in the nitty-gritty. The way politics is done has changed. It used to be that a politician had to stand in front of human beings, not selected human beings, but human beings who bothered to turn up to the free trade hall or whatever, and put their policies forward. This is what I believe take it or leave it was the attitude. Yep. The National Health Service came into existence because Nye Bevin was given, first of all, free range by the then Prime Minister Attlee to create the National Health Service, despite the fact the Deputy Prime Minister was dead set against it, in the form that Nye Bevin wanted to do. Nye Bevin said we start the whole thing on day one. And others were saying, no, trickle it in, for God's sake, let it come in bit by bit. And he said, no, this is the one chance we'll get. We're in power, we've got a majority, we do it now or it doesn't get done. And he went for, we will do it today. This is the day it will start, and devil take the hindmost. And he negotiated with everybody to get to that position. Now, you don't get politicians like that now. Politicians now, there are a few around, and they all are that way on single issues.
They're frightened of losing the job.
They all have the bee in their bonnet, and they're all conviction politicians on the issue, the one issue that concerns them. But when you look at their collective view, it's rather more tell us what you want us to think. It's all focus group.
That's right.
And we actually had a minister the other day, and he said, I think it was Ben Bradshaw. And Ben Bradshaw said the other day, and I think I quote verbatim, I've been inundated with emails about this. And the interviewer said, how many? And he said, loads. And he said, yes. How many? He said, a lot more than usual. He said, how many? He said, well, you know, we get emails off everybody, and this is one of the largest postbags I've had on this issue. And he said, how many? And eventually the answer came back, 10.
Yeah.
That's inundated. 10.
Ridiculous.
And because he was inundated by 10 emails, he was bringing in legislation that would affect 55 million people.
Yeah. It's a pity we couldn't have trading standards who could monitor the government, regardless of whichever government it was doing.
Well, I nearly said they're not trading, but if you look at their at their expenses, dear God, they are.
And regardless of which party.
Yeah, well, quite. I think we were both talking in a non-party political basis, but good on you. Cheers, Malcolm. Stephen. Thank you. I say Malcolm because I'm just about to read Malcolm's email. Malcolm from Offerton says this. Alan, I listened with great sadness and anger to the comment made by one of your callers on Friday about the charge which a home help wanted to make for cleaning her house. She wasn't a lazy fat get who feeds her kids on burgers or a scrounger who couldn't be asked to do something for herself without whinging. She was a 92-year-old lady. Then, later on, the news tells us of an 80-odd-year-old pensioner who tried to take his own life because of a ludicrous electric bill he received. Meanwhile, somewhere in the high-class shops of Knightsbridge, their respective MPs may have been shopping for plasma tellies and coffee makers for their second homes, which are subsidised by the central government coffers to the detriment of the electorate who put them there. Well, I say, says Malcolm, to any MP listening, you do your job and stop feathering your second nest. Shame on you all. If the lady mentioned lives near me, I'd be quite happy to pop round and help her out free of charge. And then he says, What on earth has happened to our country when things like this happen all day, every day? And it's hard to disagree. The 92-year-old lady in question had been discharged from hospital and said there was no help when she got at home, and she couldn't afford a home help. A 92-year-old woman couldn't afford a home help. Shame on us all.
Take one portion of bickering,
a couple of mild disagreements,
a look that could strip wallpaper.
Eamon and Diane, tomorrow from 6.
How do we resolve that? How can it possibly be that elderly people can't get the help they need? What sort of a world do you want to live in? Because frankly, I think we can do better.
95.1 FM,
DAB Digital Radio,
and the World Wide Web.
This is Manchester.
BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, the man convicted of killing the Rochdale schoolgirl Leslie Mulseed is given permission to appeal. Madeleine McCann's parents are to be given some of the evidence about her disappearance.
Ronaldo is finally having ankle surgery.
Well, this afternoon we've got heavy showers for most places and top temperatures of 16 Celsius.
And please take care if you're using the M60 at the moment. A lot of heavy rain over the past couple of hours means there's an awful lot of surface spray about. Visibility reduced at pretty much every junction.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Adamson. The man jailed for murdering the Rochdale schoolgirl Leslie Mulseed has been given permission to appeal against his conviction. 54-year-old Ronald Castry from Oldham was given a life sentence in November for abducting, sexually assaulting and stabbing the 11-year-old to death 32 years ago. The trial judge recommended he serve at least 30 years. Police have agreed today to hand over evidence about Madeleine McCann's disappearance to her parents. As a result, Kate and Jerry McCann dropped their High Court bid to force disclosure of the information held by Leicestershire Police. The McCann spokesman, Clarence Mitchell, said the information related to calls from members of the public early in the investigation, soon after the child disappeared in May last year.
Kate and Jerry welcome this compromise reached with the police. If we hadn't gone to court, we wouldn't have these 81 pieces coming in. That information now goes to our private investigators who will work on it all as a priority. Any one of those could unlock the information that could lead to Madeleine being found.
At least 40 people have been killed and more than 140 wounded in a large explosion in the centre of the Afghan capital, Kabul. Government officials said a suicide bomber rammed a car filled with explosives into the gates of the Indian embassy during the morning rush hour. The Afghan Interior Ministry is nearby. You've seen the TV advert and heard the arguments. Now it's time to have your say on Greater Manchester's congestion charging proposals. The public consultation started today, but there are still worries the publicity has been unbalanced. Matthew College is the new chairman of Greater Manchester's Passenger Transport Authority, one of the driving forces behind the plan and the associated improvements to public transport in Greater Manchester. He's concerned the consultation process will be compromised if you've got skewed information.
It could well be that there are no other options, and the public will tell us that when we go through the proper consultation process, and if that's the case, that's absolutely fine. But what I wanted was the information put forward in a completely balanced way and the opportunity to ensure that, so that the public can come to their decision if they feel that's what they want to do, and that's the way we go forward.
200 cleaners at Manchester Airport will go on strike for 3 days next week in a row over pay. Staff working for Initial Air Services are planning continuous strike action from 6 o'clock on the 17th, taking in one of the busiest weekends. They're unhappy at the company's 2% pay offer, previously rejected by workers. Manchester City Council's chief executive has taken on the job of spearheading the regeneration of Blackpool. Sir Howard Bernstein will still work for Manchester, but resigned from his second job on the board of the Olympic Delivery Authority so he could work for the seaside town. He explained the move.
Part of what we do in the city is also about how you actually support regional priorities. Once the invitation was made by government to get involved in Blackpool, one had to make a choice, always recognising that my primary commitment is to Manchester. And I felt the Blackpool opportunity was more relevant to Manchester and to the North West.
BBC Radio Manchester. Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
Cristiano Ronaldo is to undergo surgery on his right ankle in Amsterdam today. The operation will keep the Manchester United winger sidelined for around 6 weeks, but was arranged after the view of a specialist backed up that of medical staff from both United and the Portuguese Football Association. Wigan Athletic have offered professional contracts to 7 youth team players for next season. Last year's youth team player of the season, John Routledge, is one of them. Lou Vincent is to replace Brad Hodge as Lancashire's overseas player on a permanent basis. The Kiwi had been covering for Hodge whilst he was on duty with Australia in the Caribbean. However, Hodge has now decided to return home to be with his wife, who is recovering from illness. And Vincent will remain at Old Trafford for the rest of the season. And 12.7 million people tuned in to watch last night's epic men's single final at Wimbledon. Rafael Nadal beat Roger Federer in 5 sets to clinch his first title at the All England Club.
BBC Radio Manchester. Satellite weather with Heather Stott.
Well, this afternoon we're going to see more showers on and off throughout the afternoon. Some of them could be heavy and they could be thundery. There will be some drier and brighter spells in between times, but temperatures feel cool at just 16 Celsius.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Hiya. Mick in Windermere sends me an email. He sent me one last week on Tuesday because he was livid. Boy, he was livid. And he had a whinge, and I said, I think the phrase I used was, damn all to do with me, pal. Don't be getting on at me. Which is fair, because that is the fact. However, he's not given up. He says, Alan, I complained about the delay to the start of the criminal justice programme to allow tennis switch from BBC 2 to BBC 1. This is part of the reply I received today. It quickly became quote, it quickly became clear that Andy Murray's progress was turning into one of the great moments of sporting drama. We felt it was an event worthy of being shown on BBC 1, the natural place to show such an occasion. The decision was therefore taken to move it to our flagship channel, where it would be appreciated by a wider audience. And that's from the BBC Director of Sport. Does the BBC, asks Mick, does the BBC take viewers as complete idiots? Anyone watching the tennis would have already been watching it. The wider audience would be watching whatever channel they chose to watch, not what the BBC Director of Sport imposed on us. If it happened when, if only 2 channels were available, it would be akin to a totalitarian regime or Nazi propaganda. Well, I've always wondered about tennis, but I didn't realise it was Nazi. I'll try, if I may, Mick, to explain what Roger Mosey was saying. Now, you don't have to agree with this, but this is the logic. If people watching tennis were just tennis fans, Wimbledon would not be on the telly. Because there aren't many tennis fans. There are an awful lot of Wimbledon fans, but there aren't many tennis fans, first of all. Let's get that said. Tennis is a boring game, and if you went to watch it on a regular basis, you would spend most of your time snoring, because it's tedious, utterly tedious, as is every other sport known to man. However, Wimbledon, the tournament, is watched by people who are not that interested in tennis. Indeed, more people watch the final than watch the early rounds. Why? Because the final is a sporting spectacular, and people who never watch tennis watch Wimbledon final. People who never watch football, like me, watch the cup final, because it's a sporting occasion. And we have this, and I'm included in this, we have this thing, a great thing has happened, I wish I was there. And that's what they're doing. Now, you're quite correct, and those who like watching Wimbledon will have been watching it on BBC too. But those who like to watch a great match won't have been watching, because it wasn't meant to be a great match. It was meant to be the round in which the local lad got kicked out early, as is the wont. So they moved it to BBC One, so that people on BBC One, the bigger audience, would say, "Oh, blimey, look, fantastic, let's watch this." Now, I wouldn't have made that decision, but that's because I think sport is a minority interest. But the logic was, it's a spectacular moment in our society, in our community. It's a spectacular moment. Let's put it on BBC One. Let's make it available. Let's tell all the others that it's available. And that's what they did. I'm not a scheduler. If I was, I probably would have to go with the logic of it. It's not a logic I agree with. I, frankly, wouldn't waste money on Wimbledon at all. I wouldn't put it on. The only sport I'd have on television is rugby. But that would be a personal judgment. So that's the logic. If you don't like the logic, that's fine, I understand. But that's the logic. That's what they were doing. They were saying, look at this. It's gone from being a tennis match to being a Wimbledon tennis match to being actually quite an historic Wimbledon tennis match. Let's move it to a place where there are more people. And that's what they did. Sounds daft, doesn't make sense, completely illogical, but scheduling isn't logical. And in the world of scheduling, it was the right decision. I wouldn't have made it because I think tennis is utterly boring. Gary in Wigan, don't go far.
Mornings sound better with Eamon O'Neill and Diane Oxbury.
Eamon and Diane.
It's a Kimberley biscuit as promised. I went out of my way to find one of the few shops that sells them.
It's amazing what you can do with sawdust and sugar.
Gorgeous.
Packed with marshmallow and sugar.
Yeah.
It's unusual.
Sounds like me.
Eamon and Diane and you.
I mean, my dad's 81 this year, and in 1933 he had his tonsils out on the kitchen table. And it cost 11 guineas, and we've still got the receipt.
The station with Eamon and Diane for breakfast.
Well, I don't think you're going to be too upset by this.
Back tomorrow morning from 6 at BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. Gary in Wigan, hiya.
A good day, Alan.
What have you got?
Just a quickie. Well, I hope so. I just voiced my opinions about this knifing thing.
Go on.
Here we go again, where the government can't fix it. So what they do, they ban everything. Ban all the people from doing it. They did it with slapping, keeping kids in check, etc. And now you can't touch a kid, and what's happened? We've got chaos on the streets, but anyway, that's another matter. I think the basis is they don't have a real good idea what to do about it, so they just say, well, let's ban it all. Anyone with a knife, you're going to get jail, and that's the end of it. Which is actually stupid, treating the public this way, treating them as stupid human beings and can't even think for themselves. Just because a minority, very small minority, causes problems for everyone else. And that's not politics to me. They're not sorting the matter out. The day they took all the police off the streets is the day all these problems started. It's quite frankly. If you see a bobby around the corner, you chin up and you keep your head straight, etc. And there's not a bobby to be seen anymore, and I think it all stems from that.
Well, I don't know. If when the bobby was on the street, he saw you with a knife, what did he do?
Well, I don't know any sensible human being who's got a knife would actually have it out in the open. If you're a carpenter and you use a knife, etc., you're going to use it in the workplace. You're not going to wave it around the streets.
Well, they're not waving around the streets now, are they? The kids who are carrying knives carry them concealed, and then, should they require it, produce it. Well, so I don't know whether the copper on the street would be an issue here. It would be an issue in the more general thing, in the kids might feel safer and therefore wouldn't feel the need, those who carry it for self-defence, supposedly, wouldn't feel the need to have such a defence if there was a bobby about. But more than that, I don't know.
Well, I think it's in the mindset, you see. I mean, the bobbies then, when they was on the street, weren't thinking, well, if I see a knife, I know he's going to stab somebody. They didn't think like that. They just thought, well, he's got a knife, so what? He's whittling some wood or whatever. You know, they used to have them rabbit's feet knives and stuff, and nobody bothered about them. They said, oh, yeah, it's nice, that, very good. And that's the end of it. But this mindset, the government's doing scaremongering everyone into, well, you know, can't fix it, let's just ban it. That's the reason for my call, and I think it all stems from the police. There's not a copper on the street. They're in cars, and that's it.
Well,
I can travel.
I think we all agree with you that there are very few police officers on the street.
But it all stems from that, I believe. It
Well,
all stems
okay,
from that.
but I don't understand why it is wrong to ban. And it's not the government at the moment that's banning them. It's actually David Cameron who would
That's
ban
right,
them,
yeah.
not the government. But why is it wrong to ban people from carrying a weapon? I don't see why they should have the right to carry a weapon.
It treats people like idiots, quite frankly. Most folk, 99% of people have a brain and they know what to do with something that's dangerous. Just because a minority are going around stabbing each other, it's not a reason to ban it.
Isn't it?
I don't think it is, no. A knife has a use, as well as stabbing somebody, but most of the time, people don't think about stabbing anyone. They use it as a knife should be for. It's a sharp object for doing things with whatever you need to do with it.
All right, good on you, Gary. Good on you.
Just one other point.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, just this police thing. I have it from a well-known source that it is a bad. It is not really. What am I trying to say? One man policing an area of 25 miles in one car. I can't say that's real good policing in a very rough area. I'm not going to say where it is, and that is the truth of the matter.
I wonder what the figures were in your day.
I don't think they had many cars. I think it was all on the street when I was a kid.
But at the moment, if a serious incident happens, the cops can be there, rather like the ambulance or the fire service, fairly quickly because they're in motor cars.
Yeah.
I wonder what it was like in the days where if a major incident kicked off, the copper had to run there, and once he got there, he was on his own. He could blow his whistle, which might attract a copper from another area, but unlikely. The alternative was to ask them to stop robbing the bank whilst he finds one of those police boxes to make his phone call.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it was as efficient as our sort of nostalgic memories tell us it was.
Well, two small incidents. Was a friend of mine they had 9 people living in one house causing chaos, and all hours of the night, music blasting, made a phone call, nothing. The other side made a phone call over a racial comment, I'm not going to say where it is, and the police arrived within minutes.
Well, OK, but that's not about their ability to arrive. That's about the way the police are prioritising their work.
That's right.
And frankly, many people say that the police should prioritise their work differently. I, for one, think once they've covered the scene of a murder, they shouldn't then have 90 and 100 police officers, we sometimes hear, working on a murder, because quite frankly, people would very much prefer, that their streets were policed against the crime that affects all our lives.
Yeah. Point taken.
All right, we shall see. Good on you. Have a good day.
You too, bye.
0161 228 2255. Sandy says, I just came in on your discussion re jail being a deterrent to carrying a knife. I thought you were making the case for the death penalty. No one will kill anyone if death were the mandatory sentence. Sandy, in the 1950s, murder happened. So the idea that no one would kill anyone if the mandatory sentence was the death penalty is, frankly, ludicrous. Ludicrous. You may say fewer would. That's a perfectly reasonable statement. We'd have to measure it to know. But fewer would. But to say that no one would kill anyone if the death sentence was mandatory for convicted murders is absolutely balmy, and is not borne out by history or indeed by all the countries where they have the death penalty. So it's an interesting thought, if a stupid one. 0161 228 2255. Kevin says, I've just heard that the cleaners at Manchester Airport are going on strike. I was there last week. I thought they already were. Thank you. We like 'em. Yes. There's nothing wrong with old stuff. Our government study found that the UK wastes 4 million tonnes of food every year, adding £420 to a family's shopping bill. Gordon Brown has called on the public to reduce waste to help combat rising living costs. Should the members of the public point out to Gordon Brown that their finances could be improved by reducing waste in Parliament? Ah, yes, you see, there we are. We're being asked to throw away less food, and that way we will spend less on food. How about the money we throw away on plasma televisions for members of Parliament? That's an awful lot of £8. I think a plasma television these days is about £800. So £108 could be saved by doing away with just one plasma telly. Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason at all why... There is a reason why members of Parliament should have support for their second homes. There is, because it's part of the job, and that's fine. There is no reason at all why we should buy them assets. I don't think it's the job of the public to buy assets for our servants. It is our job to feed our servants, clothe our servants, look after our servants, and frankly, in the case of members of Parliament, pay them well, which we do at 60-odd thousand a year. Let us pay them well. Let us give them compensation for the extra expenses they incur working on our behalf. But let us not provide them with assets. That strikes me as being crackers. It's 1:20. We're going to talk to Jeff in Prestatyn quite soon, but first, the news headlines from Michelle Adamson.
The man jailed for murdering Rochdale schoolgirl Leslie Mulseed's been given permission to appeal against his conviction. Police today agreed to hand over evidence about Madeleine McCann's disappearance to her parents. At least 40 people have been killed and more than 140 wounded in a large explosion in the centre of the Afghan capital, Kabul. Manchester's weather, heavy showers this afternoon with 1 or 2 bright spells, highs of 16 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Well, for the moment, traffic's fairly quiet, but do take care if you are travelling on the motorways around the Manchester area. Still fairly wet and miserable on a number of routes, especially if you're using the M60. Visibility greatly reduced because of surface spray on the carriageway at pretty much every junction, I'm afraid. Now, if you're using the M62 heading into Manchester, you should have a clearing ahead of you. I can't see any major delays on camera. And again, the M66 from Bury up at the Edenfield bypass all the way down towards the M60 again, fairly quiet. No major issues on public transport, all running to schedule. If you know different though, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
With more updates than the other guys.
2020 traffic.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Jeff in Prestatyn. Hiya, Jeff.
Oh, hi, Alan.
What have you got?
Sir?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks.
Yeah. Start off with a quick question, if I could, Alan.
Go on.
What do you say is a cash advance?
I suppose, in absolute pedantic terms, it is money given to you in cash prior to your need to spend it.
Right. Okay. So let me bring you on to the specific case.
Okay.
My bank, who shall remain nameless, of course, they charged me 1.5% for using my debit card, not credit card, debit card to buy foreign exchange. And their reason for it is that I've had a cash advance. Do you see that as fair?
I rarely see what banks do as fair,
Right,
but it doesn't have to be fair. It only has to. It only has to agree with the contract.
Well,
That's the price.
I've read the terms and it's all there, page 25, paragraph 4, line number 6. If you use your debit card to buy foreign exchange, you'll be charged 1.5%. So,
Well, there you are.
So in your words, I'm stuffed.
That is the technical term for your position, Jeff. You are completely and utterly stuffed. Unless, of course, you get in touch with your bank and you say, OK, you're right, I'm wrong.
I'm not right to them. Complain,
listen. No. Listen to what you need to say to them.
Go on.
You're right, I'm wrong. And your reward for being right is I want you to close all my accounts. I'm moving to another bank.
Yeah, that's a fair point, yeah.
And they just might think, hang on a minute, for how much was it? 50 quid? It's not worth it. Why lose a customer for that?
Not, no.
And they will then come up with some reason why on this occasion they'll let you off.
Right, I'll move on very quickly to a point very close to your heart. I know it is. But start off by saying I did something yesterday that I've not done for 40 years, and I really enjoyed it. Now, steady on, Alan.
I've said nothing. You don't know what I'm thinking.
I went to watch a game of rugby league.
Good Lord.
Now, when I say I've not done it for 40 years, it's the first time I've been on a professional ground.
Oh, right.
Before. I watched the local lads.
Where did you go?
I went to Warrington, actually.
You went to what?
I went to Warrington Wakefield yesterday, and you know, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great.
We won 60-24.
Yeah.
It's kind of easy to enjoy that, isn't it?
It's not we for me because I don't support Warrington anyway.
All right.
But I went there mainly because my granddaughter was dancing on the pitch. Were you there?
Oh, right. No, I wasn't. No.
All right. Well, all the girls were dancing on the pitch, and it was really good. And I went in the Wakefield end. Because we had a concessionary ticket and they put us in the Wakefield end.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed. There were families. There was grandma and granddad, and obviously their kids and their grandchildren, and they just come as a group. And I think I heard the F word once in the whole afternoon, and I thought it was just.
You can hear that more here.
Yeah. But it was great, you know. And I just thought I'd come on and champion the sport, and I may well go again.
It is. I mean, I hope you do. And Warrington's a good ground, but there's a few good ones about. It is a game. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, and you do hear bad language and you do hear terrible things. Yeah. But generally, rugby league, professional rugby league for sure, is. Well, because one of the I mean, I've tried thinking about this many times. Because one of the attractions of the game, and it applies to rugby union as well, is that the referee is absolute. The referee's decision, and if you argue with the referee, it's not accept. In football, they argue with the referee all the time. They swear at the referee. They do all sorts of things to intimidate the referee. Well, and the rugby referee, be it league or union, says, that's my decision, live with it. Get on with the game.
Yeah, the Wakefield lads argued once yesterday, and they give him that 10-yard penalty straight away.
Exactly.
Which was
now that's a much easier way of dealing with it than is available to the football referee. One, they don't have that, but two, a 10-yard further forward isn't much of an advantage when you can kick the ball the length of the pitch. But in rugby league, which is in rugby generally, which is a territory game, 10 yards is quite important. So there are reasons why it's easier to do that in one game than the other. But because of the power of the referee, you get the sense that the people who watch it are those who want to see an authority. They want to watch the game, not just for the sport, but because they like that idea of authority, and so they behave themselves because it's part of their nature.
Yeah, and I think that also comes from the players as well. I think the players' attitudes. I mean, I watch a lot of rugby league. The Sky Sports Friday night, and I watch that with my mate, you know. And
listening to Eddie drone on?
Yeah, but they're not like the sort of prima donnas in football who are falling over, you know, when somebody blows on them or something like that. You know, they're tough lads. And I think the example they set on the pitch is a great example for the kids who play the game. Because I was watching some junior teams. They were having like mini games on the pitch before the match.
Yeah, they do.
Their attitude was great.
Yeah.
They looked as though they were really enjoying themselves, but they just seemed to have a really nice attitude about the way they were playing the game. And I just say it, like I say, I thought I'd come on and champion it. Why not? Like I say, the last game I saw was Billy Boston's testimonial, which was 1968, believe it or not, which was a long time ago.
It was indeed. Well, welcome back. Good on you, Jeff.
Anyway, thank you for your time, Alan.
Jeff in Prestatyn, enjoying a game of rugby yesterday, and as a very nearly impartial observer, good luck to him. Dennis in Urmston, hiya.
Hi, Alan.
What have you got?
Right?
I'm not bad.
Good. I've got two things for you.
All right.
First of all, when I was a kid, I was in the Scouts. And we were encouraged to have knives.
Yes, indeed you were.
You could have a sheath knife. You could have what they called in those days a scout knife. And it had hooks on for getting stones out of shoes or horses.
That's always the one they pick on, isn't it? That is always the one they pick on. Go on.
You never stabbed anybody.
No.
And you never used it at all other than for whittling or doing whatever you would do in those days. And today, the youths of today have changed completely. They just carry knives, obviously, to protect themselves. And you can in many cases, get yourself into a bit of a scrape. And with a group of lads, what else would you do if you had a knife on you to protect yourself if you're getting kicked by 6 cumheads? But pull your knife out. I think that would be perfectly within reason. The fact that you might stab somebody, but nevertheless.
But let us look at this. It's interesting that your call follows immediately after Jeff, who was talking about discipline and the like in a sport.
Yeah.
Society has changed, and people all the time criticise the youth of today. But frankly, the youth of today are how they are because you and me made them that way.
True.
So what is it that's gone wrong? We had Gary earlier saying that what's gone wrong is there aren't enough coppers on the beat. And there's some truth in that, but that can't be the answer. I didn't behave myself as well or as bad as I did as a 10-year-old boy because there was a cop around the corner. I behaved myself because my mum would sort me out if I didn't. Well, there was a degree of that as well, yes. But it wasn't that I might go to jail. It wasn't that I might go, I don't know, away to Borstal as exited in our day, or even that I might get the birch. It was, you might call it respect, you called it fear, but it was because I had to go home, and if word got back to that home what I'd done, then my parents would point out to me how I'd let them down, and in my dad's case, that would be that, and I'd be disappointed. In my mum's case, that would be that, and then I'd be sore.
Yeah,
but the mores of the family, our family, didn't allow me, my siblings, to misbehave. No. We did, but it was kept at a very low level, and we were terrified of getting caught. So, is there something there that families these days, you know, I mean, it's the old story, isn't it? You go home, you say to your mum, Mum, I've been caned at school. Why were you caned? You must have done something wrong. Now, Mum, I've been caned at school, or I've got detained. We actually had a story about a fortnight ago where parents were going to a school and learning, because they were picking their kid up from school, and saying, your child's in detention. And they say, no bloody time for detention. He's got a dancing class at 6 o'clock, so you get him out here. Well, you know, if the parents are going to challenge the punishments that their children are receiving justifiably, then the children are going to learn that it doesn't matter what I do, they can't punish me because my mum won't let them.
That's true.
So how do we go back that way? Go on, sorry.
Well, my daughter works in a school in Oldham, and a few years ago now, one of the parents climbed over the iron railings and got his leg pierced through the top of the rail. They sent for the, obviously for the ambulance, but in the meantime, my daughter, who's the first aider at school, had to look after this chap. And when everything was over, and a few days later, he came back to school to thank my daughter for helping to save him because he was very badly injured. Within a month, that same parent was back in school playing roast in hell because his child had been slapped. And not slapped, but cuffed, as you would say. And it just seems ridiculous that he could be in thanking the teachers, for one thing. This is a very bad school that she works in. And then he comes in and starts causing mayhem, threatening all the teachers because his child's come home crying. Now, that's a typical example of the parents of today.
But is it... We've stopped, or we are considerably less of a collective than we were. Now, I don't know what the reasons for that. I can point to a number of headline things, but we no longer... I mean, we started off, didn't we, earlier, with an email from a chap saying that, I think it was Malcolm in Offerton, said... because we had a lady on last week, 92 years of age, said she'd been to hospital, the NHS service. Not the NHS that's wrong, it's when she came out, she couldn't clean her own home, she wasn't well enough, and she couldn't afford to pay the price levied. And it's a comparatively low price, but she couldn't afford to pay the price for a home help. Now, when I was a kid, home helps were free. If you need, my mum used to be one. She got paid, but they were paid by the local authority, but they were actually supplied free. But now you have to make a contribution. Why? Because our society has deemed that 92-year-old ladies, frankly, if they haven't got any money, what the bloody hell are they doing being alive, for Christ's sake? They're no use to anybody. Why don't they just die and get out the way of our society that wants to be rich?
Well,
that's what's going on.
You feel that the attitude is, don't you?
So how do we crack that? How do we get back to where we are all actually together?
Well, the only way that it can be done is by providing them the money, whether it be through taxes or whatever, to be able to fund these things. I mean, after all, people are living longer these days, a lot longer than they were when I was a lad. And, you know, obviously they didn't have the number of people to look after in those days, I don't think. Whilst age is going up, people are still getting ill. And everything else, perhaps are living longer. So the number of people that need tending are just really robbing the purse, as it were.
So what we need then is for nurses to be trained in marksmanship as well. And just pick a few off every weekend. You know, you've had your fortnight, you've got nothing at home, so here you go, bang, sorted. That'll do it. I don't see what the fuss is about.
You're a cruel man.
Well, I'm just looking for systems that might work, Dennis. Have a good day.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, go on.
Because there's something else.
Oh, my word.
This is really serious.
Oh, right.
There's something in the Mirror today, and it says that police sniffer dogs will have to wear tiny booties.
I saw that, yeah.
When they search homes of Muslims.
When they're talking about Muslims, they've got to wear them for all sorts of places.
Well, it just says Muslims.
All right, well,
so they don't cause offence.
Well, in other newspapers, they're having to wear them when they do crime scenes because A, they might leave. They might leave or affect the evidence. So that's what I read. But right. I didn't see it in the Mirror.
So they're not wearing nappies then?
They're not wearing nappies. No, they teach them not to crap. I mean, obviously, they don't teach them not to crap ever, otherwise they'd explode and it'd be messy. But they teach them not to crap on the scene. Because, I mean, the policemen don't, do they? So, you know,
they don't.
So they can stop the dogs as well.
As far as we know, they don't, anyway.
Well, as far as we know. We'll go with that. But, yeah, I did see that story. They're quite nice boots, though, aren't they?
Well, they are very nice.
Lovely. Brood boots, little bit of Velcro on them. How they'll get that off the dog hair afterwards, I don't know. But there you are. Have a good day. We also learned today that the most dangerous dog in Britain is the sausage dog.
That's right.
The Dachshund.
Yes.
So there you are, bloody Krauts again.
Yeah, well, you put that
I'm sorry, that was cruel.
For me.
It's the Germans. You'd think they shouldn't have sent all them stormtroopers, they should have sent Dachshunds. Have a good day.
And you, and have a nice holiday.
I'll do my best. 0161 228 2255. That reference to holiday is that I'm here tomorrow, and then I'm not here Wednesday for a fortnight. I'll be back actually a fortnight on Thursday, so I'm having 2 weeks and a day off. And the Saturday programme will be presented by John Ryan. And this bit, well, it's confusing for me, but I don't care, I won't be here. But the first hour, from 12 till 1, we're going to stretch Heather Stott. There are so many jokes available, aren't there? But if you like those jokes, then use them again, because the second hour we're going to stretch Becky Want. So there you are. So you've got two stretched women. Instead of a rather charming chap. Now, come to think of it, but there you are, that's what you've got. So, I'm off, and that's it, really. That's all I got. I won't be here, I won't care. Don't give a fig, why should I? You don't care about me, why would I care about you? Exactly. To avoid all the chances, this is Dave, to avoid all the chances of MPs being overgenerous with their expense claims, why not build a block of furnished flats for use by all MPs who need to live in the area where they work? This would do away with the need for MPs to provide their own accommodation at our expense, which, when they leave Parliament, they do not reimburse to the country any of the profits on their second home. However, they wouldn't be able to go... Do they really do that? They wouldn't be able to go sleeping around, drinking, drug-taking and fiddling, because they'd be seen, wouldn't they? Well, yeah, but it's so much easier than that. It is so much easier than that. I can't speak for any of the Greater Manchester MPs, but I do know at least one of them, who uses hotels when he's in London doing his parliamentary thing 4 nights a week. And he's never bought property, he's never rented property. He uses a hotel. And, of course, his hotel bill is paid by the state. And, frankly, quite right, too. I know another MP who, well, actually, he's no longer an MP, he's retired, but I know a retired MP who, for all the time he was in Parliament, he rented a flat. He shared it with another MP, so they rented a flat, furnished flat, and that was it. They were in London, they rented a furnished flat between them, and again, the state picked up the bill, and quite right too. But when he left office, he didn't have a flat that was worth £50,000 more than he paid for it, so he didn't have £50,000 of equity that you and I have so kindly provided. And the same goes for the Member of Parliament who stays in hotels when in London. And yes, we could provide accommodation. And before you start saying, what a stupid idea, why should we provide accommodation for Members of Parliament? We already do it for some. The Prime Minister is provided with accommodation. Many other ministers are provided with accommodation. So why we couldn't also buy property and provide it for every Member of Parliament, I don't know. We provide office accommodation. We built a dirty, great big building near Parliament so that they could have better accommodation because their office accommodation was overcrowded. And I say again, quite right too, they should have proper offices. Personally, I think MPs should all have their own office. I don't think they should have to share with another Member of Parliament. I think that cheapens what we are as a nation, not just makes their job more difficult. They should have a private office with their staff in it and nobody else. Of course they should. It's a basic office facility. So we do provide accommodation for MPs. Why shouldn't we also provide residential accommodation? What I strongly object to, is the fact that they make a profit on what we pay for, which I think is unacceptable. It's just gone 20 to 2. News headlines with Mark Edwardson.
The man jailed for murdering the Rochdale schoolgirl Leslie Molseed in 1975 has been given permission to appeal against his conviction. At least 40 people have been killed and more than 140 wounded in a large explosion in the centre of the Afghan capital, Kabul. And Gordon Brown has urged you and your family to stop wasting food. That's in an attempt to try to stem the rising cost of living. Manchester's weather, heavy showers this afternoon. You can expect highs of about 16 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester. 2020 traffic.
Well, it's been a fairly quiet afternoon, thankfully. It even seems that most of the surface water has now subsided from a number of motorway routes around the area. If you're using the A34 Key Street heading into Manchester city centre, watch out. The inbound stretch is closed off between Atherton Street and Byrom Street, between Good Harvest Studios and the Opera House, with a diversion set taking you off via Water Street, Liverpool Road and then on to Deansgate. No major issues on public transport. If, however, you can update me further, though, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester. Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
Good afternoon. Cristiano Ronaldo is likely to miss the start of the season wherever he's playing as he undergoes ankle surgery today, which is expected to sideline him for 6 weeks. The operation was arranged after the view of a specialist backed up that of medical staff from both Manchester United and the Portuguese Football Association. Carlos Queiroz, meanwhile, has given the strongest indication yet that he could leave Old Trafford to take charge of Portugal. The Reds' assistant boss was in Lisbon for discussions about the job, saying the matter needs to be resolved between the Federation and Manchester United. Brian McClare, the former United striker who's currently in charge of the club's academy, is being linked with replacing Queiroz as Alex Ferguson's number 2. Wigan Athletic have offered professional contracts to 7 youth team players for next season. Last year's youth team player of the season, John Routledge, is one of them. Bury player coach Effie Soji believes the playoffs are a realistic target for them this season. The Shakers finished 13th in League 2 last campaign.
We can't say we're going to go for promotion because they have to put money into the club, and we don't really have that at the moment. But to play and go for the playoffs, I feel we've got enough quality of the players in the changing room now to take us there.
Liverpool have announced that they've given Portsmouth permission to talk to striker Peter Crouch about a possible move to Fratton Park. The two clubs have reached a verbal agreement on a deal. Lou Vincent is to replace Brad Hodge as Lancashire's overseas player on a permanent basis. The Kiwi had been covering for Hodge whilst he was on duty with Australia in the Caribbean. However, Hodge has now decided to return home to be with his wife, who is recovering from illness. And Vincent will remain at Old Trafford for the rest of the season.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It was fantastic news for the wife and myself and this morning, and just absolutely fizzing. With the wife being British, that's an opportunity over here. I'm not quite sure of the rules and regulations of becoming registered sort of local over here. If that works out, even better. But the fact is, I'm classified as an overseas at the moment, and I'm looking forward to making England my home for a while.
British tennis number one Andy Murray has broken back into the world's top 10 following his performance at Wimbledon. The 21-year-old reached the last 8, his best Grand Slam display, and has moved to 9th from 11th in the world rankings. Roger Federer remains the number one player in the world despite his epic 5-set Wimbledon final defeat by world number 2 Rafael Nadal, but the Spaniard could replace Federer at the top of the rankings with a good performance at the US Open, which gets underway at the end of August. 12.7 million people, meanwhile, tuned in to watch last night's final between Nadal and Federer. Salford coach Sean McRae has told BBC Radio Manchester that being granted a Super League franchise would surpass anything the club wins this year. The City Reds thrashed Doncaster yesterday to lift the Northern Rail Cup and are currently top of National League One.
What we said at the start of the year was we wanted to win the Northern Rail Cup and we'd love to win the grand final. We've done one of those. We're sitting on top of the table. We've got a tough run in. In between time, of course, we have a licence announcement coming up 2 weeks on Tuesday. Now, for me, that'll be the ultimate. That'll be the biggest victory for this club this year if we are granted a licence for the next 3 years.
In Speedway's Elite League tonight, Bellevue entertain Coventry. Stockport-based rider James Wright will wear the Aces colours as a guest rider, whilst new Danish signing Patrick Hugard makes his home debut.
Scratch the surface. You get a mystery.
So what do you want to do, Gillian?
Well, we have a medieval riddle to solve. So we start digging.
Dig a little deeper, and you get an adventure.
Looks like we found the identity of our guys. Knights Templar.
What have you done? What have you done?
The search for the truth is beneath us. Bone Kickers starts tomorrow night at 9 on BBC One.
Hello. Are you all right? Oh, goody good. Dennis in Norwich. Hiya, Dennis.
Hello, Alan. Alan, I'd like to make a point about knives.
Go on.
The pun was intended. I'm not a kook, but I believe there is little need for a point on most knives. I don't think the point is actually used. Now, I was listening about half an hour ago in the car, in a car park, eating my sandwiches, and I had a very sharp knife in my hand at the time, peeling an apple. However, I've ground the point off to a nice, smooth curve. It'll certainly cut, but it wouldn't stab. Now, I suggest that most of the kitchen knives on sale need not be pointed. The point's not used by a cook. This wouldn't prevent the baddies from repointing them, but it might well reduce some stabbings, impromptu or domestic-type stabbings.
So nobody ever got stabbed with a butter knife, is what you're saying, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you look at a set of knives, one of them I had with me, they're all pointed, they would all stab, but they need not stab. I think the manufacturers should be coerced into rounding the tips off. They still flash, there'd still be cuts going on, but I think, like somebody said earlier about if you reduce the number of knives, it reduces a certain percentage. I think with rounded tips on the knives, that would reduce some.
Yeah, somebody asked me that once before, and I don't have an answer. Why bother putting a tip? Why bother putting a point on a knife that doesn't need it?
Well, I would suggest as an engineer that it's the grinding process in the factory where they're made that to put the edge on the
it's easier if it ends.
Generate.
But it's easier to put an edge on a knife that ends, if you like.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've got a grinder in my workshop and I've ground the point off because I didn't want my grandchildren to get a hold of it. But I do take it with me whilst I have my sandwiches in the car.
Fair enough. I don't know. I mean, it's a very good point. It's been asked.
Did he make that pun?
Yeah, I did make that pun. Yes, how sad I am. But it is I don't know another word for it, but it is a good argument. I don't know the answer to the question.
No, somebody might have heard it who can make a difference.
I wonder. I did ask once before. Is there a reason that a knife which, at least, appears not to need a point has got one? I suppose if you a boning knife, it has to have a point. The way you use it has to have a point. But a bread knife, for example, doesn't have a point generally.
No.
Whereas a carving knife, again, a slicing knife, as it might be called, that's got a rounded front. So it's when we start looking at kitchen knives, vegetable knives, they've got a point. They have a point on them because, of course, you might want to use it if you were peeling potatoes in the old days. You used to eye the spuds, didn't you?
That's right.
So again, there's a point required. I wonder if there are too many kitchen knives with points.
Out of a set of half a dozen knives, you would only need 1 point, so that's reduced the number of points.
But then the loony would buy the one that's got the point.
Yeah.
The only way you'd stop that is if you go in many a shop now that sells knives and it says knives will not be sold to people under the age of 18.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know whether you could actually, because if you've got a range of knives, somebody comes in and they're not of an age where they'll be declined the purchase of a knife. So they say, I want that one there, and they say, why do you want the pointed one? Because that's the one I need.
Yeah.
All right, there you are. So I don't know that it would make a realistic difference.
Oh, well.
More's the pity.
OK, then.
All right, good on you.
Leave it with you.
That's all right. Now, that's Dennis in Norwich with his point about points, now it comes to think of it. Yeah. Maria says, Alan, there must be a better way of organising our welfare system and social services. A couple of weeks ago, there was a report saying that 26% of adults of working age in Liverpool were on benefits. Surely it would make sense to ask people who are on benefits to donate some of their time to society, such as helping the elderly with shopping and in the home. It would be of mutual benefit, so says Maria. And yes, make people earn their benefit. I don't know. I can see consequences of that, but on the face of it, sounds sensible. Sandy sent me an email earlier, which I poo-pooed somewhat. She now said, it may be a chap. Sandy can be a chap's name. My apologies. I know not your gender. Perhaps I nearly said share it with us, but that's more than anyone can hope for. Alan, my comment was given tongue-in-cheek as a reaction to the stupidity of your statement about jail sentences deterring knife carriers. Well, OK, I can cope with that. I can live with that. So thank you very much indeed. But the purpose of a jail sentence, one of the purposes, is definitely to act as a deterrent. Now, if you're saying that it doesn't work, I understand that. Fine. Many deterrents don't work. Alan, I don't want to defend bank charges, but being charged 1.5%, that's £150, to change sterling into a foreign currency using a debit card is value for money as far as a service is concerned. Well, that may be so, I don't know, but there are organisations, I'm led to believe, I've never sought one out myself, but there are organisations that will change your currency free of charge. No, I've never looked. As I am on Wednesday, when I'm going abroad, I get to the airport, because I always fly, just to upset that lady from Cork, I always fly because I can't be bothered with the long-distance jobby. And when I get to the airport, I get my currency there. And people say you can get it much cheaper on the high street, and you can get it... Well, you can't get it much cheaper on the high street, because they only charge about 2% tops anyway. So if you're changing 100 quid, the difference between £2 on the high street... Sorry, £2 at the airport and £1.50 on the high street or whatever, I can't be bothered the energy. And you've got 3 hours to kill when you get to the bloody airport anyway. So I do it at the airport. I know, I just chuck money about as if there's no tomorrow. That's what it's like when you get it easy. Yeah, quite so. Oh, shut up. 0161228 2255. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. And, of course, you can text on 07786 206 951. And I've made this point myself more than once, but there's a story in the Mail today that points to people who are in line to the throne. A chef at an Italian restaurant, a gardener with 3 illegitimate children. Illegitimate children sounds to me he's perfect for the throne. And a divorcee called Tracy. Just 3 of the very unlikely people in line for the British throne. But don't panic just yet, Charles. Quite. I don't understand that. But there you are. Ian Liddell Granger. Ian Liddell Granger is 322nd in line to the throne. Mr. Liddell Granger is the only British MP on the list. Perhaps political considerations lead the normally jovial and publicity-friendly Tory representative of his Bridgewater constituency to be rather offhand about his claim to the throne. I do not know about this list, least of all where I am on it. He snaps from the office in the Palace of Westminster. If I am, it is through my mother's side. And indeed it is, says the Mail. And there is a major skeleton in that cupboard. Mr. Liddell Granger is the great-great-nephew of the British-born Nazi Prince Charles Edward, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a grandson of Queen Victoria. So there you are. So he's on the list. Mrs. Catherine Laying, nee Princess Catty Galitzine. She sounds perfect for the British throne, doesn't she? They're like Galitzine. As the wife of a man who runs a travel company in the West Country, 43-year-old Mrs. Laying may seem ordinary enough, but she's a member of one of Europe's most colourful and interesting families, the Galitzines, after the Bolshevik Revolution. Katya's grandfather, Prince Vladimir Galitzine, good Lord, fled his Russian homeland to become an antiques dealer in Paris. Yeah. She's 612th. Sasha Harmon, she's ranked at 444th, 22-year-old drama student who, together with her younger sister Pascal, who's 445th, by the way, was born in St Leonards-on-Sea, Sussex. The father, Roderick, is an artist in Hastings, but the sisters appear because their London-born mother, Helene, 43, is daughter of Princess Christina of Hesse. Isn't this fantastic? And then we've got Tracy Richardson, who's 1,214th in line to the throne. It doesn't tell you where I am. But we are all in line for the throne. All we need is for enough people to die. Of the right sort, obviously, not just any old deaths, but that's what we need, for enough people to die. If enough people die, in the case of Tracy Richardson, who is no Essex girl, it says, because she lives in Essex, no Essex girl, but a 44-year-old Texan, descending from George II's eldest daughter, Anne, the Princess Royal. If she were to find herself a serious contender for the top spot, the San Antonian resident would no doubt be dubbed Racy Tracy, as she's been married and divorced and now lives with her common-law husband, Michael White. So there you are. No, there you are. She's 1,214th. We are all on the list. Or at least we are all in line for the throne. Obviously, if it came to me, I'd reject it. I'd say, I don't want the job. The money's rubbish for a start. Oh, it is. It is. And you have to pay for your own roof to be mended. We'll not have any of that. Oh, I'll do that anyway. Anyway, there you are. So that's that. And it just so happens on this day in 1307, Edward I, having conquered the Welsh, died on his way to Scotland. I think if I had to go to Scotland, I'll feel unwell also. But he died on his way to Scotland, on his way to fight Robert the Bruce. I know, it's fabulous, isn't it? Yeah. But there you are, you see? We know all sorts of stuff around here, but the Daily Mail telling us that there are all sorts of riffraff in line for the throne, which is remarkably prescient because there's an awful lot of riffraff who've ruled, really, isn't there? Phil says that all this discussion re-banning knives seems to me to be missing the problem. Currently, handguns are banned in this country, but there are still plenty cases of guns being used. Surely the answer is to control the people who are using these weapons and not, as the government seems to love doing, just banning everyone as soon as there's a problem. Yeah, that's good. That's a very salient point, is it not? And Alan, as usual, at 1 o'clock, I switched over to Radio 4 for a few moments just to... What's going on? Just to catch up on the national and international news before switching back to you. And David Miliband, the Foreign Secretary, talking about Zimbabwe, he said that he'd visited a place in South Africa where refugees were holed up. Now, that's the third time in the past week I've heard the phrase used on a BBC news programme, twice by BBC correspondents. Little wonder...
Take one portion of bickering,
a couple of mild disagreements.